Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Mark Schillinger, founder of the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend, a wilderness rite of passage adventure camp that prepares young men for the challenges of the young adult world. I'm also the founder of the organization Challenging Teenage Sons, which helps parents and their young men have more caring and cooperative relationships. Welcome to the program today. It's called Getting Focused. Help your son navigate his short attention span. So I want to begin by asking you 3 questions. And if you answer yes to any of them, and especially if you answer yes to all of them, it's likely your son has a short attention span. Now, notice I didn't say ADD or ADHD or anything like that. We'll come back to this and why I didn't say this later on in the program. So here's the questions. Number 1, does your son struggle to stay focused on schoolwork, chores, or being on time? Does your son battle anxiety because he feels like he's falling behind or not as capable as others? Does he feel like he's at a disadvantage because of how his brain works? I know exactly what your son is going through because I have short attention span myself. And over the years, I've learned how to master my own brain states by becoming skillful at shifting from short attention spans to longer, more focused attention spans when I need to. Both types of attention styles have advantages, disadvantages. I often hear from the parents that I mentor say that their son has ADHD or ADD or anxiety, and therefore he doesn't focus very well. And then, always, one of the parents will say, I think our son has learned to hide behind the diagnosis by not giving his best effort to paying attention. It's become like an excuse for him not to do the things he doesn't want to do. Sound familiar? I'm going to tell you a quick backstory about my main point that I'm going to say about young men who use their short attention span as a reason to not participate in the activities they don't like. Here's the story. I was raised in New York City in the 1950s in a tiny little apartment with 2 very loving and supportive parents, twin brothers, a sister, and my Russian grandmother who spoke very little English. For the majority of the time, we spoke kindly to each other, we cooperated with each other. However, if an argument did occur, shouting and intense yelling could quickly break out, and then I would get triggered so easily by the discord, the disharmony, and I would feel overwhelmingly anxious and helpless. I also would get distressed when I was at school. I wasn't able to keep up with all the work the teachers gave me, and I definitely didn't have very much confidence being around other kids my age who were good at adapting to school and social life. Other than my close circle of best friends, I tended to keep to myself and wondered why I was so different from most other children. And back in the day, there was no term like ADHD or ADD. The quote-unquote street diagnosis labeled it as fidgeting. Adults who knew me would say to my parents, Mark's a good kid. He's anxious a lot, but he'll figure it out. Now, as a teen, I could never use having a short attention span or ADHD as an excuse not to focus my attention on schoolwork or chores or any number of things that I didn't want to do. The community expectation was that I would adapt sooner than later. Well, I have to tell you, it took me about 4 decades to learn how to deal with my anxiety and short attention span, and truthfully, probably another decade to become skillful at operating my atypical neurodivergent brain. I truly wish I had some mentor telling me when I was a teenager that I was a normal person with an unusual brain compared to what society expects you to have. Had I known the ways to overcome anxiety and ADHD when I was younger, I would have had a much easier time learning how to run a business efficiently, be more compatible spouse and friend to others, and a more compassionate father. So when I say young men with ADD, or what I'm calling short attention span, or SAS, when young men face unique challenges, I know that they also possess incredible potential. I know what I'm talking about because I've learned now how to start and operate 3 companies, even with my quote-unquote disability or deficit. And now I'm a master at helping young men become skillful at dealing with their short attention span and anxiety. So please listen carefully to what I'm about to say. It's important. If you're going to help your son learn how to focus his attention by being mindful in the moment, as well as learn how to be more organized to better handle what's in front of him and what's coming, you need to make sure that you don't label your son as a special case. There's nothing special about being a short attention span or a long attention span person for that matter. So if you want to hear my full perspective or rant about labeling young men as special cases, listen to the podcast I did a while back called Your Son Is Not That Special. I don't believe ADHD or ADD is a deficit, and I certainly don't believe it's a disorder. As a doctor specializing in the neuroscience of stress management, I know that the term ADHD is now being viewed, thankfully, as a normal brain variant. The term neurodivergent implies that short attention span brains are no more, or no less, important than other types of brains that may be more rational or linear or logical. In fact, it's now understood that both types of brains were really equally important, and still are, to the evolution of human history. Without going into too many details about the neurodivergent brain of a short attention span person, it's now understood that this trait probably helped our ancestors be better hunters or explorers with quick decision-making and with high sensitivity to changes in the environment. Way back in that day, and is now, short attention span brains are usually high energy, impulsive, and can be super focused on specific things. Situations that call for creativity, quick problem solving, quick thinking, or hyper alertness are well served by our short attention span, or what I'm calling SAS brains. Therefore, I have no desire to tell young people or adults that they have deficits or disorders or are special. Rather, I tell the young men that I mentor that they have an equally valuable brain compared to those people who can focus and sit for long periods of time while being rational, linear, or logical. These young men are so relieved to hear that both types of brains are necessary. And then I end my talk about this by telling them that, unfortunately, we live in a culture that favors the linear and logical thinkers. Why? Because those types of brains conform better to structured environments like sitting in schools and sitting in offices. And because of that, society tends to think of short attention span people as inferior in some way. I can't tell you how many young men thank me for giving them that perspective. They feel so relieved. Okay, let's jump in and start talking about 3 ways that you can help your son adapt to his brain by learning how I help SAS young men acquire specific virtues like relaxation, organization, and discipline in order to become confident in their ability to be productive when they need to be. Number 1, the first thing I say when I mentor young men with SAS is this. I tell them that in order to become the man they know they want to be and need to be, happiness and productivity boils down to 2 key ingredients. They have to have a way, and they have to develop the will. They need a way, and they need the will. The way refers to living with a structured system that guides them to calmly focus their energy, manage time, and achieve goals. Without clear routines to develop discipline, SAS young men can feel overwhelmed. It leads them to experience frustration, which then causes them to procrastinate. And most importantly, SAS young men often just say, I give up, or I don't know, when it comes to challenges because they've lost respect for themselves. They don't think they can do it. So they have to have a way. The will refers to the inner motivation and the outer actions or behaviors needed to overcome challenges and push through frustration. I don't sugarcoat for them. I let them know that their parents or their friends or their heroes in their video games cannot motivate them to achieve their goals in life. I let them know in no uncertain terms that they need to learn how to get out of bed and know when to have fun and when to be productive. And by the way, I'm really clear with them when I say that getting out of bed does not mean that they wait for their parents to come into their bedroom and wake them up. It means practicing using their willpower as soon as the day begins. They got to wake themselves up. I tell them that if they don't know how and when to turn on and off their SAS brain, they will not be able to adapt to the challenges of the adult world, straight up. And you know what? They know this. I'm not telling them anything new. They just don't like to talk about it because they'd just rather have fun. And of course, I let them know that I'm mentoring them to become more independent so they'll be ready to go off to college or get a job. They know that I'm not mentoring them to expect them to live at home after high school and think that their parents are going to pay their way to stay immersed in the world of distractions and fun. So here are a few specific things that you need to know what your short attention span son needs to learn how to do. It's up to you to find your son mentors or counselors or tutors who can teach them executive functioning skills. And if you know how to do it, please do so. First and foremost, your son needs to learn a few simple mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques that just take a few seconds to do, like right on the spot. This way, he can relax immediately when he's getting anxious that he's not getting things done or doesn't know how to get things done. Once he gets lost in this anxiety, he's going to quit. He's going to look for the dopamine fun pill. In other words, he's going to find his devices and play games as the way to soothe his anxiety. I believe that every human being, starting from the age of about 3 or 4, can learn how to relax themselves no matter what's going on in their environment, externally or internally. Certainly, our ancestors back in the tribal days knew how to do this. They knew how to relax quickly. So if our sons know how to relax first when confronted with challenges, they'll be able to change their chemistry from being filled up with adrenaline and cortisol to becoming filled with endorphins and dopamine. These are neurotransmitters that calm the mind and body and allow young men and adults to stay focused. Number 2, your son needs to learn how to get into what's called a flow state. I let young men know that they are in a flow state when it feels like the rest of the world is receding into the background and they're essentially only aware of the present moment. I explain that this term is often called being in the zone. And they always respond right back, telling me that they've had this experience, whether it was from playing sports or at their job or working on an engaging school project, or definitely when they're creating music or art or connecting with people. So they know what a flow state is. They may not have heard that term, but they know what it is. So I'm not going to go into all the aspects of how to get into the zone or maintain that zone, but I will give you some of the hints I tell young men. And you can tell them this directly right from this podcast. They need to make sure that the environment that they're working in has no distraction, like cell phones or any screens of any kind, other than the iPad or the computer that they're working on. All of the other devices need to be in a different room. Straight up, no negotiation. They can't have it. Number 2, they need to be comfortable in their chair and at their desk. Good ergonomics makes it easier to maintain focus. Number 3, if they're going to use sound and music in the background, they need to be trained on the exact types of audio input that actually enhance focus and energy and not distract them. Number 4, they need to know when and how to take breaks, how long these breaks should be, and what they should be doing on those breaks. When they take the right kind of breaks, they don't get bored, they don't lose focus, they don't lose attention. Number 5, they need to have a way to write down creative ideas that are always popping into their SAS brain that has nothing to do at all with what they're focusing on. And yet, it's really important to them. In order to prevent them from having their minds wander onto something that may be more interesting in the moment, they need a way to preserve their ideas and learn to come back to it at a more appropriate time. So let them write it down on some separate piece of paper or Word doc so that they can come back to it later. And number 6, last suggestion here. When they leave their work and it's not completed, they need to leave really good notes to themselves on what they were thinking when they stopped working and how they were going to proceed forward when they were going to return to work. Believe me, I know that this is a really important step because when I don't complete everything as a short attention span brain, and then I come back to it a few days later, I often don't really remember where was I, what did I want to do. So this is an important step. So for anybody listening to this podcast, young or old, I know you've been in a flow state and the joy that it comes with it. It's really important that your teen son learns to develop the skill of how to create a flow state so he can look forward to completing any kind of work, especially when they don't like the work, because becoming masterful at creating flow states will help them focus their attention on things they do like to do when the time is right. I'm going to say that again. Here's what I tell young men. When you get really good at doing things you don't like to do because you have the right flow state going, you're going to learn skills that are going to help you do the things you like to do, like making beats or whatever you're doing. They love that. Believe me, this is a strong selling point to tell your son why it would be good for him to develop the skill of being in the flow state. I let them know that two things can be true. They can be creative and they can be focused. That always gets their attention. Why? Because that's what they want. When they want to be creative, they would love to get all the right things done, according to them, as quickly as possible. Like it's a real turn on for SAS people to know what they want to do, create some time to do it, and get it done right away. So that's what I tell the young men. You'll get better at doing everything faster when you develop the skill of setting up a flow state. The third thing that young men with short attention span need to know are executive functioning skills. Now, that's a big topic, but I'll boil it down to just a few things right here. Executive functioning skills. And you need to tell your sons this, and you need to, again, find mentors or show them yourself. Or maybe there's a relative who'll do it, but somebody needs to show them. Number one, they need to learn how to manage their time using specific systems like to-do lists and calendars. And they need specific techniques to manage their time, like how to set priorities and implement that to-do list. Number two, they need to learn about money. I don't care if they're 12 or 25 or anywhere in between, they got to learn about money. I remember when I was a teen and I asked my parents for money, my mom would always say, "What do you think? Money grows on trees?" So it's on us, the adults, to teach them about money before they move away to college or get a job. So I show young men how to create a budget, how to go shopping, compare the cost of things. I teach them how to get jobs, as well as learning how to save money and how to spend it wisely. And then last, and I would probably say the most important thing you need to be telling your son is that he needs to learn how to create healthy habits, routines, because this will lead them towards developing the virtue of discipline. I remember my first yoga teacher as a teenager, he said to us, "You develop discipline by doing the same thing at the same time every day or every week or every month or every year, whatever it is that you have to do consistently and reliably without reminders from others." So your son with a short attention span needs to learn how to substitute their unhealthy habits for new healthy habits that will improve their mental and physical health. And the last thing I'll say about healthy habits is that young men with SAS must become way more organized and know how to keep track of their responsibilities. One of my mentors told me many, many years ago, "A place for everything and everything in its place," end quote. I still think of that advice now 40 years after he told me that. So before we end this podcast, let me give you one real life story of a young man with short attention span and how he worked through it successfully. Last year, I was mentoring a 16-year-old. He was diagnosed with ADHD. It was hard for him to accept it, even though he knew he needed help. He wanted to be able to keep up in the classroom, do his homework, definitely wanted to play on his high school basketball team, and he wanted to try to maintain the new relationship he had with his first ever girlfriend. This dude was a kind soul. He was intelligent. And eventually, he sabotaged his perspective about himself in life. He had fallen into the belief that he was destined to be a failure, and as a result of that, he started to give up trying to keep up with sports, schoolwork, and with even many of his friends. In fact, the only thing he didn't want to give up was his girlfriend. because he felt that she was one of the only people who really understood what he was going through and what he was feeling. Unfortunately, as much as his parents tried to help him adapt to the challenges of the young adult world, they were not able to show him how to operate his atypical or neurodivergent brain. Long story short, after about 4 months of mentoring him and mentoring his parents on how to work with him, he suddenly became so much more motivated to live the life he wanted to live. It was like overnight, he just started doing stuff. When he saw that he could overcome his diagnosis and train his brain to do the right things, he opened up to the world again. His virtuous best self was showing up with his family and friends. All he needed was the right guidance. So in conclusion, I'll say this. I've been mentoring young men since the year 2000, starting with the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend and in my private practice now. Here's one thing I know about all young men, regardless of attention span. They want to be your heroes. They want to be heroes for their parents. They want to win at life. They want to do good things in the world. They desperately want you to be proud of them. So it's up to us, the parents, the adults, to give young men the support that they need, because most likely, no judgment, the school won't do it. Most neighbors won't do it. Most relatives don't know how to do it. And certainly their digital devices won't do it for them. If you want to start receiving my free weekly blogs, contact me at info@challengingteenagesons.com. And when you do so, I'll send you a free copy of my proven 7-step technique for parents called How to Communicate to a Teen Brain. Thank you so much for listening today.